Hey guys, Andy M. Spoken Labour with his talking hands today as well. I must be really distracted before Julia Webb I've got me today. I'm talking. I'm in that sort of mode today, and I'm talking my hands all the time. But it's what it is. So, anyway, listen. Over to my new friend Julia Webb. She's going to do 4 poems from us from her new book, and we're going to be talking about them all in a bit of depth in between each piece. So, over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to start with the first book in the collection, Crash Site. Crash Site. We remember only vaguely now the wreckage of our mother, her damaged fuselage suspended precariously between 2 broken pine trees. How carefully one had to tread so as not to bring the whole thing down. And everywhere the stink of spilled aviation fuel, at least in the beginning. We never did find that black box, so it was always unclear exactly what had happened, and each survivor told a different story. But the wreckage was there for all to see. Seats and belongings scattered far and wide, things broken open, life jackets snagged on jagged branches. Though our mother's windows had popped out with the pressure, she sometimes talked affectionately about the plummet, but swore she could remember nothing of our other life before takeoff. Our first memory was the screaming of metal and the silence which came after.
Really glad you read that piece out, Julia, because when people obviously like yourself send your poems over to me to have a look at each time the books, that really hit me quite hard, that piece. And I think it's a challenging piece, I think, to start the collection off with that. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to ask you first of all then, what made you want to start the collection off with this piece? Because this is like, I would say starting it off with a bang, definitely.
Interestingly, it wasn't the first poem in the collection. For quite a long time, the collection was in a slightly different order. So I had these kind of sections. So there was one that was to do with the mother and one that was to do with the grandparents, etc. And it kind of kept those loosely. But I had a completely different mother poem first. And quite near the end of the editing process, I had a different last poem as well. I decided to take these 2 poems out and like bookend the collection with it, because I kind of felt like they summed the collection up in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, yeah, it's like quite an arresting opening as well.
Yeah, I think it's when you always look at books, and it definitely applies to poetry books. I'm sure you'd agree with me. It's like of a novel. You've got to really grab people's attention. That's definitely an arresting piece to read straight away with that. Now, what made you want to write that piece? Because it's like there's a crash in it, and there's several layers in it. I think, and I like that in it.
Yeah, I don't always write extended metaphor poems, and I'd been sort of thinking about this thing to do with intergenerational trauma, because my mother had quite a lot of trauma in her childhood, and how she kind of passed that down to us in a way. And I'd been thinking about it, but not really writing about it. And I'm a really huge fan of rockumentaries, and I was watching this rockumentary about the band Lynyrd Skynyrd, half of whom died in a plane crash, and there were these images of like debris, like, you know, personal items spread through this woodland, and it was just a really shocking image. And I just started writing this poem, and it has been heavily edited, but I wrote the bones of it while I was watching that documentary. It just sort of gave me a way into it, maybe.
Yeah, no, I think sometimes a really good TV program like this can really lead you into something like that. Yeah, no, it's multi-layered, and I love the line where, and it's not known when you're writing this way, but life jackets snagged and jagged branches, because like it was the image, the rhythm on that is carried to the 2 jackets and jagged really well for me. But yeah, And then like you had all the stories about each survivor told a different story, but the wreckage was there for all to see. That, when you talk about relationships and also the plane crashes, operates in several different layers as well.
Yeah, I think when I did my degree, which was a few years ago now, I did my dissertation about autobiography and biography and well, more autobiography and memoir, and I was really interested in memory and
Yeah, shows you
how
this.
if 10 people witness an event and you speak to them 10 minutes later, they will all tell a completely different story. And in families, different stories get repeated and changed over time. So that's
Yeah,
something I'm quite interested in.
it shows this piece, and I think it's a great piece for what you're leading people in by doing a massive crash. Then like, no, we'll say no more. Okay, I think definitely you do a bang, it can lead you one or two several directions, and say it's a great one to start off with this. So I know, listen,
Thank you.
let's
I
move
think
on.
it allows you to be an it's like flagging up that all narrators are unreliable as well, really.
Yeah, it does. I think it's a great way of doing that, and I'm going to say no more because let's move on to poem number 2, which is poem number 2 in the collection.
It is poem number 2. We weren't as connected as we could have been. Some days the distance between us became whole galaxies, oceans even. Our voices were garbled, as if we were speaking underwater. Fishes swam from our mouths. I did not speak shark, and you did not speak whale, but we each had harpoons, and we weren't afraid to use them. Other times, heavenly choirs hovered above us. The distance rolled itself up like a rug. Flowers fell from our mouths as we spoke, and precious stones, fancy cakes, delicate sandwiches with the crust cut off. This is real connection, you once said. And your words smelt like that yellow rose in our old garden and tasted like blackberries.
Two memories, or male memories, that really stuck in with this piece, and that's why I'm really pleased. It's one of my favorite pieces in the book. This one again, actually, is when you
Thank you.
first talk about speaking underwater. You wouldn't have known this. I had a band going some years ago, and we actually recorded the vocals from a vocalist underwater
Oh, wow.
on one of his tracks. And I always remember that we played it back. It was completely unusable because we did a piece called Underwater, and all you could hear, like, you couldn't understand what he was saying. And I think that's what's really great about this piece. So you're talking about that, you're speaking underwater. It shows the distance between the two characters in the poem. And I also love the bit about the last two lines about yellow roses in our old garden that taste like blackberries. It can't happen, but it works really well. I think it talks about the myth of memory again, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was what I intended, really. The poem is really about it's about when my mum, before she died, we lived quite a long way from each other, and so a lot of our relationship was over the phone, and sometimes it was really good and sometimes it was really terrible. So, and sometimes it would tap into that warm childhood sort of feeling, which is what the ending is about, really.
Yeah, definitely. There really is a nostalgia, people, when you read this poem on the end of it. And it's a beautiful ending, it really is. But you
Thank
can
you.
get the hints in it as well, particularly, for example, from the title, where the nostalgia wasn't always good. And I don't know your mum, and I don't know your relationship with your mum that well. But certainly you can see it from there from the title, which is a contradiction to the last line. But it's a deliberate contradiction. I think it works really, really well, that.
Thank you.
Did you find that when you're structuring this poem, did the title come pretty quickly? Did it, or did that come at the end of the
Do you
piece?
know, I can't remember. It may have had a different title, and that was the first line. And then at some point that became the title because whatever title I had wasn't very good,
That's a
which
great
is
title.
often the way.
I think I've always believed the title in the poems. You either get it straight away, or you can be sat there for weeks after the poem's done trying to get the
Yeah.
right title.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly it.
I've had it, and I bet you've had the same as well. And I've done a poem, really happy with it, and then I spend 6 months trying to get a title for it, and it ends up going for about 200 titles.
Yeah, I think that's why sometimes I take the first line as the title.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. It's a really good idea. If you can't get a title you like, go with the first line.
Yeah.
It's not lazy. I think it takes you into the narrative quicker, straight away. Anyway, great choice again. Okay, we're moving a bit further into the book now, aren't we?
Yes. So I thought, because I've had two mum poems, I thought we'd have a father poem. My father says he has forgotten how to make a storm. And though lightning still crackles from his fingertips, he doesn't know how to throw it anymore. And he has become so used to the thunder in his head that now he hardly hears it. He just turns up his hearing aid or switches the radio on. The news is always bad these days, he tells me, as if it wasn't always so. I don't think I was ever able to make lightning, though I carry my own thunder. It rumbles around inside me, threatening to spill out. My father's newest house is a house of calm, though he is still the god of rain clouds. In our old house, all those years ago, he and our mother crashed against each other and made the most tremendous noise.
That's a really interesting piece, because again, it's contrast to the first two poems, which are definitely about your mother, but it's and people are wondering first of all with this, as we talked about with the previous poem, this is one that's obviously is an example in it of where the first line of the poem became the title, really.
Yeah.
But I think I like this because it's what you did with this was where you were talking about you've told about the breakup. I'm presuming it's a breakup of your parents' marriage anyway, but done
Yeah.
it for a very childlike, innocent way. And that's tricky. It's really tricky writing to do that. So was this? It feels like it was quite a hard poem to write. This one to me as well when I was reading back on it.
I can't, I can't really remember, but it might have been. I think it had quite a lot of editing. I was quite interested in that thing of how people change and mellow as they get older. My dad, I felt like my dad was quite angry when I was a child, and now, he sort of says he can't even remember that. So I was really interested in that, really, how people change and the narratives that they tell.
Yeah, like my parents are like that. Where my dad used to have an atrocious temper when he was younger, and I'm quite mellow, mate. I always have been, but he's mellowed the older he's got. So I saw that in that piece, and I know what him and mum were like when they were younger. They're still
Yeah.
together, but sometimes they absolutely hate each other. So that's two very strong-willed people for you. So, but yeah, that's kind of great because I loved it in where I think this one, in contrast to the other two pieces, I think the last two lines do link up well to the title as well. But I think there's a lot of memories in this, and there's like I could quote lines to you. But the one I want to know about is what made you want to put the news is always get this right now. And the news is always had those days in italics. What made you want to do that bit in italics?
I think he might have even said that or
I'm
something like
wondering
that.
that.
The news is always bad. Like as if that wasn't as if that wasn't a thing, because the news is always bad, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
it
I don't
just
watch it. I don't watch it for
Yeah,
that
no, I
reason.
don't
So
either, actually. But I remember as a kid, it was always they focus on the difficult stuff, don't they?
yeah, and
So
I also like the bit where the first Pat stanza is really in his voice, but then you've made the deliberate choice in the second one to do it from your own eyes, and that works really well. But obviously, then you started off with, "I don't think I was ever able to make lightning," which I think is great. It's a great contrast in the first stanza as well, where you've took the memories, looking at him first one, then for your own eyes in the second. But yeah, and what made you want to use the line of "My father's newest house is a house of calm"?
um I think because he's lived in, so he doesn't live, neither of, well, my mum's dead, but neither of them lived in the home we grew up in when I was a kid. And I think as he's got older, so with each place he's lived, he's become more mellow. Although actually since then he's getting less mellow again. So that's interesting.
Blimey. Yeah, I've known, and I'm not going to be ageist when I say this, I've known some older people, the older they get, the worse they get, because they just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
That's why, yeah, I can relate. I know it's a great piece. I think it's a great choice for contrast between that piece and the first two pieces of the book. But people are wondering, the book itself has a lot of contrasts in it. So that's why it's a really great book to read this. Which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Where we're going back to another mother poem now to wrap up things with. Back to you, Julia, for poem number 4, anyway.
Yeah, so this is the last poem in the collection. Remaking Mother. I am making her from wire and string. I am using anything I can find in the house. I am incanting her name as I cut and shape and glue. I am singing her back to life. Her eyes are buttons. Her hair is string and strips of polystyrene. Her mouth is a plastic milk bottle lid, red as a late summer rose. She hefts herself up out of the junk and walks towards me. I keep on chanting, keep on singing. She holds her hands out, pleading. Her arms are lolly sticks and her hands are corks. Her fingers, pearly-headed pins. Her body is a pizza cut from a box lid. Her legs are toilet roll tubes, and her feet are large round pebbles from the garden. She shuffles towards me and I can't turn away. I sing her name out, Carol, Carol. The sunlight moves across the window and lights up her face.
It's a really mysterious poem that I want to wrap up with the collection, I felt, Julia. I know if my brother was here today, I know what he would say about that. My brother's not a poet, and I love him to bits, but he would turn around and said to me straight, "Oh, she built a voodoo doll." And I thought, well, I can see why he would get at with that, because I think the use of the eyes in it, and then the hers, and the she's, it's the tone of it and the first lines alone make it really interesting, really fascinating pieces. So I'll have to ask you the obvious question first of all, then, is what made you eventually decide to wrap up the collection with this poem?
I think because there's quite a lot of dark poems in the collection, and it's kind of like a resurrection poem in a way. It's like, bringing someone back to life. And it was in the first section with all the other mum poems to begin with. And I think the collection finished on the poem before that. But yeah, it just felt like the resurrection of the mother was a good place to end, really.
Yeah, I think it does. What you've done is, tell me if I'm wrong with this, but my interpretation of it was doing that. You then take people back to the beginning again, don't you? So
yeah,
that's what it felt like. It, yeah. And I love the line to this where I love the line of she hefts herself up out of the junk and walks towards me. That itself made me think of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Yes, actually,
it is very Frankenstein.
Yeah,
and actually, my editor and I had quite a discussion about that word hefts, because at one point I thought I might take it out because it was maybe a bit heavy, and she was like, "No, keep it in." It really works because of that.
Yeah, it's unorthodox, but I think it works. And sometimes I think we're writing, the accidents are the better ones sometimes, and that's why I think it's definitely. It felt like to me, I thought, I was wondering if that was intended, but it works really, really well. And I love the line. The other obvious line is her arms are lolly sticks and her hands are corks. And I thought, again, I know it's gone into the Frankenstein mode, but her hands are corks is really interesting. So, was that an accident about the corks? Was it, or did?
I think I was looking for an image of something that you could make hands and fingers out of. So partly the poem comes from years of working in a preschool where we made stuff out of junk. And my son used to go to these puppet workshops, and he'd make these like incredible puppets out of tubes and sticks. And so I think it was partly influenced by that.
No, it works really well. No, it's really because it's got the childness. Oh, to get this right now, tongue out my mouth. The childlike qualities that you see in poems, but also the very dark layer in that piece as well. And I think it works well because your book goes on that slight balance between the darkness and the childhood, almost comedy in places, and it works really, really well. So yeah, it's a brilliant book, and I can recommend it to everyone who's definitely today. Check it out. So, but that's all my questions, Julia. So thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Come back on again when the next book's ready, whenever you're ready.
I'd love to. It'd be wonderful.
And I'll pull it to pieces again for you. Do not like that. But anyway, hang around. I need to put you off microphone anyway. But that's it today, guys and girls. So another episode of Spoken Late. Thank you yet again to the wonderful Julia Webb. I said for and keep preaching on. Get a book. She's excellent. So we will see you all sometime down the road. So as Don Callis over at AEW Wrestling says, stay safe. And more importantly, stay over. And we will see you all next time.